Biden administration being sued because of their refusal to release in a timely fashion records related to the assassination of JFK. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is from NBC News. The headline is, "What are they hiding? Group sues Biden and National Archives over JFK assassination records." As a reminder, the JFK Records Act, which was signed into law by Bill Clinton, required the documents be made available by October of 2017. President Trump sort of kicked the ball down the road to Biden. Biden has continued to push forward the date when those records will be released, raising a lot of questions about what it is that they are so worried about revealing. Joining us now, we have a guest who's actually quoted in that article who caught my attention. He's a former CIA agent and actually former Moscow station chief, Rolf Mowatt-Larssen. He's also a senior fellow at the Belfer Center at the Harvard Kennedy School. Great to have you, sir. Welcome.
Good to see you, sir.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
So you had a quote in that article, and you lay down, based on your long history and experience with the agency, what you think is the most plausible explanation of who was behind the plot to kill Kennedy. I'll read your quote here, and then you can sort of elaborate. You say, "What I think happened in a nutshell is that Oswald was recruited into a rogue CIA plot. This group of 3, 4, or 5 rogues decided their motive was to get rid of Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, because they thought it was their patriotic duty given the threat the country was under at the time, and their views, which would be more hardline or more radically anti-communist and very extreme politically." So is that some of what you think might be revealed in this document release, if they ever ultimately come out? What do you think could be in those documents that would be interesting to the public?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that after 60 years, the document should be released, with the exception of a few things that might just frankly compromise something that the people and the U.S. government should keep secret. So it's not an unconditional release everything position I have. It's after 60 years, the truth belongs to the American people, and the American people should know the full truth. I think it's worth pointing out, before I offer any comment on my own theories, is that our own government in 1979 put out a report from the House Assassination Committee hearings that had crucial findings that started with the idea that there probably was an assassination, a conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy, which means it's not really a pure conspiracy theory. It's something our own government believes. That same report included the findings that the U.S. government, in all probability, was not involved, whether that would be CIA, the president, FBI, or any other arm of the U.S. government. And I think after 60 years, if the U.S. government itself was involved in the assassination of Kennedy, we would all know about it, because we couldn't keep that secret for 60 years if it was a government plot. At the same time, the findings included the judgment that it wasn't the Russians, the Soviets, or the Cubans, or organized crime that set out to kill the president. So that leaves the theory that if there was any sort of conspiracy, it included Lee Harvey Oswald, but also probably a small number, less than a handful of people from the government who had the motivation, the means, and the opportunity to potentially kill the president. So that's what I think the documents will help shed light on for the serious researchers and historians who still want to know the full truth, to look at those documents to see whether we can still piece together the information that would end the mystery of who really killed JFK.
Right. And what leads you, though, to that conclusion? And why do you have confidence that it would even be in the documents? I mean, my understanding of the revelations of MK Ultra, COINTELPRO, the only reason we even know about it is because documents were basically stolen by a bunch of activists, which allowed FOIA people to know exactly what to FOIA. Otherwise, it was such a tightly controlled program, the documents themselves would have been effectively lost to history and to the Church Committee. So why should we expect that 60-odd years later that a similar kind of cover-up hasn't happened in that way?
Well, I don't think there will be documents where, once the documents are released, we're going to collectively say, oh, wow, that's what happened. I think, again, it's going to provide the basis to continue research, to finally I'm not in the school of believers who think that this mystery will never be solved because it's been so long. I think we have to keep at it. And the reason we have to keep at it is the truth is more important than anything else. What we do know is even before the Kennedy assassination, there were things that CIA itself failed to disclose, that covered up. In fact, there was a very fascinating Studies of Intelligence article in 2013 that essentially said John McCone, who was the director of CIA after Helms had been fired by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs, deliberately withheld information and deceived the committee in the Warren Commission when they asked him to testify. So what that proves is, regardless of the reason, and I don't think it was to cover up any sort of knowledge of the Kennedy assassination, the agency was worried at the time about lots of things that could have had tangential connections to the Kennedy assassination. I would call that the covert action culture of the time, the assassination, the attempts to kill Castro, the dealings with organized crime to do that, overthrow governments in Latin America. There were a number of activities the CIA was conducting at the time that the CIA was clearly trying to cover up and not disclose in the aftermath of the president's assassination. So I think the reason probably, unfortunately, this would be a very bad reason in my judgment to withhold documents, that the agency or the US government are embarrassed about what the disclosures of these documents might reveal about other things. That would, to me, be an unacceptable reason to keep this secret. We should know at this point more about those activities. I might point out that at the time Kennedy was killed, the CIA wasn't even under any form of effective congressional oversight. That didn't happen until 1979 with the Church Commission hearing. So again, it's the idea of disclosure and transparency is a duty. And if there's a strong extenuating reason why these documents should not be revealed, I think it would be wise, forget about the legality and the law, it would be wise for the US president to indicate exactly what that would mean, that would cause him to decide not to release these documents that belong to the American people, frankly, not to the CIA.
Well, and the current stance has hardly been convincing to the American public, a majority of whom still believe that there is more to the story than the official government narrative here. And part of what makes you so interesting is that you have so many years of experience with the agency. Could you speak to how what you learned about how the agency operates, how that informs your theory of what you think the most plausible scenario is here?
Yeah, that's the question that got me interested in this. I like so many Americans, I'm very interested in what really happened. I think it's a piece of our history we need to know. I didn't become even suspicious that there might be an explanation where 3 to 5 people might have conspired to work with Oswald to kill Kennedy until I examined that as a possibility, and I realized, wait a minute, if there was a small conspiracy of a very few number of people who could keep the secret for 60 years and take the secret to their grave, be fully witting collaborators with Oswald in the plot, then I thought the most likely explanation would be some CIA officers at the time. This really pains me to even suggest this, and I'm not saying I certainly can't prove it. I think it's something that needs to be fully explored, is the idea that it looks kind of like a CIA operation in terms of the motive. That would be the president betrayed, for example, all the people the CIA worked with at the time to overthrow Castro at the Bay of Pigs when he called out the Bay of Pigs. People would say, well, that's no motive to kill the president. But it might, you have to add to that perhaps some of these maybe same people who thought, again, a very small number of people who thought that the president gotten over his head with the Russians in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there were civil rights problems at the time, and the country was highly polarized. I know now we're living in a time when the country's almost as polarized as it was in the 1960s, but it was a time when there were extreme views on all sides about the politics, about what was happening in the country, and it's not unimaginable that a very small number of people thought they were being patriots if they were to do something this monstrous. Again, this is not something I accuse the agency of or think the agency had any direct knowledge of. But when you look at the key officials then and afterwards, even presidents later like Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson and others, they all suspected there was a conspiracy. I think the most disappointing thing to me as an American, because I serve the people first, and then I think of myself as a CIA officer. I'm a citizen first. The most disappointing thing about this is our leaders, we couldn't trust our leaders to tell us the full truth. We couldn't trust our leaders to ensure that we knew the full truth. They wanted to spare us from the truth. And I have never in my lifetime been comfortable with the idea that our leaders should know something that in some way, at some point, the American people also don't know.
Yeah.
What impact do you think that has had on the public? Because even if, like, regardless of what really happened, you have a majority of Americans who think the government is lying to them. I mean, what do you think is the fallout from that?
Yeah. I'm so happy you asked me that question, and we didn't do any sort of rehearsal on all this, so I was wondering where you were going to come at it from. And this, to me, is one of the crucial questions, and the reason I agreed to do the interview. I'm not here to prove I think there's a conspiracy of CIA officers did it. That is my fear. That is my concern. And that, like other conspiracies of that kind, small group of people work together on to kill the president, is we should still examine thoroughly. But the reason why we should release the documents is that we're at historic levels of mistrust of our government in general. Usually because the government withholds things from us that we have a right to know, that we need to sanction. And it hasn't just been in the 60s and 70s. Things like, if you remember, Watergate, it took the deputy director of the FBI, Mark Felt, to be, as we now know, deep throat, Woodward, and key source for Watergate, to topple Nixon. In other words, an acting, serving deputy director of the FBI was a pivotal source of the truth so that we could take down a corrupt president who had broken the law. And in this case, with historic levels of mistrust in the government, why add to that? Why not explain? If you're going to withhold information after 60 years when a law has been passed to release it, at least explain, justify why you would continue to take that position instead of just release the information. I would accept it if someone got up and said, there's some very specific things, a few documents we're not going to release, but here's all the rest of it. That would be a much more understandable position, because if the government is at in a historic period where I think the U.S. government writ large, but particularly the national security part of the government, Defense Department, CIA, FBI, et cetera, and the White House, need to reinstill faith with the American people that we're being transparent and we don't use secrecy to hide the truth.
Yeah, this would be
really well said.
Small step in that direction. Rolf, thank you so much for taking some time with us. We're really grateful.
Great to speak with you, sir. We should have you back on soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting our work. Counterpoints is up tomorrow. We're excited to see what they do. I love the fact that we got 4 shows a week now. So you guys are really helping us out. I mean, we have some hiring that we're doing right now, which is literally only possible because of all the premium support that you guys have shown us. We can't thank you enough. Link is down in the description. Otherwise, we're going to see you all next week.
Love y'all. Enjoy Counterpoints tomorrow, and we'll see you on Monday. cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.